Just when you thought 2020 couldn't be any more bizarre, he comes along. Now from the man cave in Mountain View, California, it's Nick Pinkerton with the Twisted Wrister Podcast. Hey, howdy, hey there, Twisters. It's Nick, it's July 12th, and you are listening to another Twist Cast. Thank you so much for joining here, and for the myriad of folks who came over from Hot Take Hockey when we had our most recent live stream. Welcome aboard. I'm doing this now, hopefully on a weekly basis, talking about some stuff that I might not cover in my videos, and also using it as an opportunity to produce some longer form content. So it's fantastic to have you along. And John, thanks so much for, introducing me to a new set of Twisters. It's fantastic to have you guys here, and I will get started. But first, before I do, I'm going to actually throw a little shout out over to Amino. So Amino is a community platform, so you can go on the App Store, the Play Store, and whatnot. And it is a robust community portal in a sense. So you have online communities where you can connect with like-minded folks. And I was actually recently invited to a group here that's literally just called Chell. But hey, there are over 7,100 people who are registered in this cool community group of Chell. And so I recommend that you check out Chell and possibly follow me on there. It's really nice because I can use that as an opportunity to meet new hockey fans from around the continent, around the globe, post images, post links to my videos, even post blogs. You can actually blog on there, create like wikis, and kind of use it as a community knowledge portal, which is super cool. Anyway, that is Chell, and the app is called Amino. That's Amino. Shout out to Pat for hooking me up with that community there. And hopefully I get a chance to chat with some more folks who are part of that community there. So wanted to make sure that they got a little tip of the cap there. So a few things we're going to cover today. I'm actually bringing on a guest, my friend Matt Jacobson, aka the AZ Sports Guy. He's on YouTube. Go and check him out. I was watching his videos about 2 years ago when he started, and it's interesting having somebody actually cover that sports market and having grown up in that sports market, because it's a tough one. It's a tough one to be a part of. Arizona, the main teams over there have only won one championship among them. And as somebody who's a fan of teams that like the Sharks, like the Vikings for football, I'm used to going through championship droughts myself. And so it's going to be awesome to connect with him. We'll talk a little bit about the Coyotes heading into these playoffs. We'll also talk a bit about the Coyotes offseason as well. Hey, that's a team that we should all be on the lookout for. I always thought that they were going to, between this year or the year before, kind of break through, and they just quite haven't done that yet. But hopefully, at least they'll be able to start drawing a larger base of fans on a consistent basis with some of the executive ownership that has been brought in this season and the season prior as well. So sort of the new thing that's happened since my last podcast, we actually are going to have an NHL playoffs. It's been pretty much confirmed, or at least they've moved into the kind of the next stage of that deployment, if you will. So August 1st, we're going to return to playoff hockey. We've got 24 teams, and we've got kind of a wild schedule packed with games every day, at least in the initial rounds. But of course, as a Sharks fan, I won't be watching my team in the playoffs. So it's just going to be the weirdest thing that I've ever seen, honestly. It's almost like watching like Olympics or something that doesn't happen very often, and you might not have a real stake in it, but nonetheless, I'm totally going to be looking into the matchups going forward and maybe doing some previews. My dog Cortana will be making her playoff predictions, so that should be pretty exciting. And I hope that you're looking forward to this as well. It's just pretty awful that we'll have to wait until December until the next season. But I imagine that if you look at that period between August and December, there will be a lot happening. You'll have the draft, you'll have free agency. So enough to keep hockey fans engaged. Even as a Sharks fan, we've at least got an interesting offseason to look forward to. I actually started talking about that this past week, discussing the coaching decisions the Sharks will have to make. Here's a little clip of that in case you weren't able to watch that earlier. But given that this team is so reliant on their veterans who have played together for 7, 8 or more years, Burns, Vlasic, Thornton, and Marlowe if they come back, even Couture over a decade with the team, Hurdle 7 years with the team. It's ultimately up to these guys. Really, it is. It's up to them to bring their game back to the level that it had been just a season prior. So if Bugner is someone who the players are already familiar with and, generally like and say, hey, he's going to help us commit a little bit better defensively. I think that we as players need to work a little bit more on our transition game out of our own zone so that we're not turning the puck over. Maybe just some tweaks to the gameplay driven by the veterans would actually help this team succeed under Bugner. So I still think that he's the most likely option. If I were to assign a percentage, I would say he's got a 65-70% chance of remaining the Sharks head coach. So there you go. You've got a few high-profile coaching candidates out there, and I'm sure there are others that I haven't even talked about yet. I mean, we just saw Lindy Ruff get snatched up by the New Jersey Devils. It'll be interesting to see him back in that role because he hasn't coached as a head coach in a few years. Of course, he coached with the Buffalo Sabres during a pretty successful point in their career, and he also coached the Dallas Stars a few years prior as well. All right, now I am joined by Matthew Jacobson of the AZ Sports Guy. Go check out his YouTube channel. He's covering the Arizona Coyotes and other teams in the Phoenix metro area. Matt, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on, Twisted. Like how this place looks. I'm looking at a wall right now, so I don't know. I didn't have a better intro.
Well, did you even expect the Coyotes to be in the playoffs when we actually had to come to a pause here?
No. To be completely honest, I did not.
Well, now that we've been away from hockey for about 4 months, I kind of see it as teams are able to reset. It's not like really there's any momentum like there normally is heading into the playoffs. So I'm curious to talk to you a little bit about your impressions on the Coyotes going into the playoffs, going into that first round against Nashville. What are your impressions on this team now that we've been away for a while and they've been able to hopefully get healthy and we'll resume practicing soon?
I've talked about it in the last couple of videos on my channel, and it's pretty much 50-50. I am very cautiously optimistic, but at the same time morbidly curious because I can see it going down one of two ways. This team comes out looking the way they should, people that were injured and trying to play through injuries like Kessel will come out looking great, or this team's going to come out looking sluggish because watching this team for the better part of the last, I think, 14 years now, but especially, kind of eagle-eyeing them for the past couple of seasons, there are plenty of times where they just don't show up, especially when they're playing against teams that, let's just say, aren't quite on their level when they're at their peak. So I have no idea really what to expect. I think if everything goes well and they come out and take it seriously, they can easily win in 4 games and come out and look really good.
All right, so best case scenario, they could be one of the more competitive clubs out there, you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, are you guys fully healthy now? I was just looking at an injury report from the end of the season with Jacob Chikrin and Connor Garland. Should they be all healed up by about now?
I would hope so. The only person, at least to me, that didn't show up on that training camp roster would be Lane Peterson that had any sort of injury, but then again, he's a Tucson Roadrunner. So everyone else, it should have been about a month or so that they should have been out to start, so they would have been back for the playoffs at regular time if Arizona would have squeaked in normally. I think Garland and Chikrin should be fine. They've even been releasing little clips and whatnot from their training camp, so everyone that I'm seeing so far, it's only very small, heavily edited clips, so there's some context there, but everyone's looking okay from what I'm seeing right now.
That's good, man. That's kind of the worst thing when you're in the playoffs or when you're kind of one of the lower-seeded teams and somebody absolutely critical to your team's success along the way gets injured before the playoffs start. It's almost like you almost wish that you weren't in the playoffs because then that way you could get a better draft pick considering you didn't expect to necessarily make a deep run in the first place.
Exactly. I'm not going to lie. When my wife told me that Connor Garland got hurt, because I think I missed that game, my first reaction was, we're not making the playoffs. I mean, they were already starting to struggle a little bit, but when your only 20-goal scorer in the past 2 seasons is out, and there's about, 9 games left or 7 games left, I'm like, we're done.
Yeah. So the first round, or I guess the pre-round or whatever you want to call it, you guys are going up against the Nashville Predators. Now, Nashville was having kind of a down year, and then they went through their coaching change midseason, bringing in John Hines from the New Jersey Devils. And, they were able to get a little bit hot there down the stretch. Of course, momentum doesn't really mean anything right now. Do you have any impressions when it comes to Nashville and the potential matchup with them?
Just for a little bit of context before I start talking, the last time I was able to pay enough attention to be at least vaguely familiar with Nashville was back during the 2012 playoffs when they were known as a very defensive team, and most of the people that I talked to, I try to just confirm if that's still kind of their identity, and then of course you're getting guys like Matt Duchene, so obviously trying to get that offense going a little bit. But from what I can tell in different conversations, that a little more well-rounded, I guess, than I'm used to them being.
Yeah, I don't think
So
this year they're not doing one thing spectacularly. When I think of Nashville, I usually think of outstanding goaltending, but that hasn't really been the case this year. The shining point has been the production and the defensive play of Roman Josi. He was the leading scorer by far with 65 points in 69 games. So, they still have a very robust blue line, but even so, the numbers don't necessarily back up their play in the defensive zone as it would in previous seasons. Rinne had an .895 save percentage and a 3.17 goals against, whereas Saros had a .914 save percentage in only one fewer start, and he had a 2.70 goals against. So that's likely who you're going to be facing in the playoffs.
And from what I can tell, he's had a pretty decent year this year. It just kind of, for me, sucks to see Rinne, I don't want to say necessarily fall off a cliff, per se, but to see, his looking at his numbers, pretty consistent career kind of hit that corner that you never like to see them hit, because I'm pretty sure he was the up-and-coming goaltender when I started watching hockey, or not that long after I started watching hockey. So it's just weird that these guys are getting older now.
Now, what about your goaltending situation? I mean, I think that probably this year versus last year, it seems more clear that Kemper is your number one. What's your confidence level like for him in the playoffs?
I'm not gonna lie, I'm very confident overall, but at the same time, I've never seen him play in the playoffs, and that critic side of me is telling me to just hold on to some reservation. While I still think he'll play well, I still kind of need to wait and see how he looks when we start that first game.
Well, I mean, even if if he falters early on, and I'm sure some goaltenders will just because of, being away from this level of competition for so long, you still have a couple of options with Antti Ranta and even Aiden Hill if something really drastic were to happen. But I'm looking at Ranta's numbers, and those are still pretty respectable as well. Although I know that, from your perspective, Darcy Kemper is your clear number one.
Oh yeah, 100%. But I also want to at least put it out there that I'm actually happy to see Roncho is able to bounce back like he did this year. Still isn't great, but the fact that we're getting a little more consistency, it seems like he's not playing, like trying to force himself playing injured and actually playing, as a competent backup. I do like the 1-2 punch. I was talking with Hot Take Hockey a little bit earlier on that I would actually like to see them split Kemper and Ronta's time in the first round of the playoffs to get them both kind of going. And then if one of them, let's say, isn't looking very good, you have that second option because they both should be healthy right now.
Now, speaking of players who have played injured before, I did see a recent video that you made about Phil Kessel. So feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're basically saying that he was playing injured here, and that obviously somewhat justifies a dip in his stats. Only 38 points in 70 games here. I assume his health is good now, but what are you expecting now in this kind of last chapter of year one for Phil the Thrill in the desert?
I'm not gonna lie, just to add a little bit of context, I'm a little 50-50 on it, where I'd rather someone not play injured, but at the same time, for those minor injuries, if you feel you're good to go, you feel you're good to go. But I also feel like he was playing injured to the extent that it actively hurt the team, and I don't necessarily want to, excuse or give him a pass for the mediocre play, because as, a 32-year-old two-time Stanley Cup champion, no one's telling Phil Kessel, no, you're going to play tonight. So many guys in the system, you could have brought up anyone else for 1 or 2 games just to fill in to give him a couple days off, but then you look at that active games played streak and you know what it really was about. But going into what I expect out of him, I expect what I expected when I had that freak-out reaction last year to the trade. I expect him to come in, lead this offense, get some goals going, and get us into the actual, first proper round of the playoffs.
All right, now give me 1 or 2 players that we should be on the lookout for in the playoffs who might be kind of slipping in under the radar for Arizona. Who do you think is a player, sometimes when you make a deep run, some of these depth pieces. I think of a guy like Nick Bonino for the Penguins a few years ago against my Sharks. Someone like that, or a David Bolin for the Blackhawks a few years back. Somebody who's kind of slipping in under the radar, who could actually just kind of dial things up to 11. Do you have a player like that on Arizona you can think of?
Well, the first name that comes to mind is Taylor Hall, but give me a second to explain why. Because I know some of it is a meme, but you got a lot of people trying to pass off the Coyotes slipping in quality as that whole Taylor Hall curse. And people were saying how he wasn't producing, but he was not far off of a point per game while in Arizona, and one of the biggest reasons why Garland got going the way he did. I can legitimately see him going up to 11 and him and Garland completely taking this team forward. But as far as a depth guy, I'm really interested to see what Barrett Hayton could do, because he looked really good during that preseason training camp era. That first little bit of time throughout this season, he looked really good. And I would like to see if they actually let him play and give him a little bit of consistent ice time, depending on who you pair him with, what he could do if they do decide to play him. Because I think he definitely could help to kind of anchor maybe that third line, to where I don't care who's on his wing. You need to kind of get something going. Your first couple of lines are tired. Maybe you need a late goal, maybe an insurance goal. I can see him filling in that role very well.
Terrific response. I like that, going with a real young gun too. Alrighty, I think that should kind of wrap things up when it comes to the Coyotes in the playoffs. I know that there's another team out there that you do like to follow, and not exactly my cup of coffee, but what are your impressions on the Golden Knights going into these playoffs?
My impressions on the Golden Knights is that we're going for a cup, baby!
Yeah, you guys don't have to worry about getting through us anymore.
And just a little bit of a pot shot, as an Arizona fan, you have no idea how satisfying it was to see the extended playoffs and no California representation. And you know that my favorite, only tolerable team that I like in California is the Sharks, because I like their logo, and they usually have a better culture about them and a better fan base. But it was just really satisfying to see that as both a Knights and a Yotes fan.
Yeah, it's bizarre, man. And it's interesting because... of course, we've seen a huge rivalry emerge with San Jose and Vegas over the last 3 seasons. And as somebody who's been, obviously in the thick of it, I've actually, dare I say, I actually miss the Kings being good. I miss that rivalry for some reason. This San Jose Vegas one, it's just kind of nasty, man. People are jerks to each other. Obviously, we've got lots of viewers who are Sharks fans. But we've got a few Knights fans here too, and everybody's cool with each other. But man, I don't know. I don't know what it would be like if it were the Sharks and the Kings. If I were making YouTube videos, if I would, have conversations that really reflected that rivalry so much. But yeah, enjoy it while it lasts. Actually, one of our viewers had this question about my Sharks, and I'll answer that one of these days. But if the Arizona Coyotes, whether this year or another year, when they're not, the heavy favorite or anything like that, let's say the Arizona Coyotes get Phoenix its first championship in over 19 years, what would you do? How would you feel? I know that obviously there's a feeling of elation there, but what would that mean to you? How do you see yourself being a part of that?
Ooh, that's a hard question to answer, because it requires probably 5 or 6 minutes of context, if you'll give me the floor.
By all means, man, you're a storyteller. I like it.
All right, so my first memorable game. I started going to the games back in 2007 for that Decade of the Desert year, but I got to meet Shane Doan on my birthday. It was the last game of the year against Vancouver in 2007, and that is still one of the best memories of my life until that 2010 season. So my dad was working at the arena, and when I found out that the Coyotes were filing for bankruptcy, first and foremost, this team was my life. It was Sonic the Hedgehog, Phoenix Coyotes. That was all I had back then. I literally sat down and just cried. I will admit that. I had the same reaction when the Cardinals lost that Super Bowl. I just could not handle myself. I fully admit, I was like in 6th grade, and I just sat there and just cried. Yeah. But so when we finally got to the playoffs, and it showed this video of all the headlines going from the bankruptcy to the kind of fight to try to find some sort of ownership, and how this team was not looking to be good that year. and then it start. I think it's Alley in the Jungle was the song that they're playing, but it starts building up, and then you start to see the Coyotes. They're bouncing back, they're responding, they're winning, and then you get to see the Coyotes in the playoffs. And I'm looking around, the lights haven't even come on yet, and it's just everyone shaking their white pom poms. It's just this huge whiteout that I never thought I would get to see, and that moment is still the single best in my entire life. I can remember that vividly, just having tears of joy with everyone. Just no one cares about the Coyotes in this town. No one has ever cared about the Coyotes in this town unless they're in the playoffs. And the fact that I've been told that I was a loser for liking the Coyotes, the fact that you only get small quarter articles in the sports section for the Coyotes lost again or whatever, and to see.
Do I know how that is? Even here, man. If you live north of San Jose, no one gives a crap about the Sharks. It's embarrassing,
and that just sucks. And just to see the passion and energy. I don't even care that it was fair weather. Looking back on it, that was just so exciting that this thing that I loved, this thing that I was so passionate about, finally got the recognition and support, and there was excitement and just this electricity about the arena. That is still like the best thing that I've ever experienced in my entire lifetime. And ever since, I remember how betrayed I felt around that 2015 or 2014 season in 2015 where they started selling off pieces even after they got ownership, when in reality anyone who watched that team, well, let's go ahead and skip over that shortened season that happened after the Coyotes lost in the conference finals, but if they would have just brought back that core, paid them what they needed to pay them, because we were still so far below the cap ceiling, it was ridiculous, to where if we would have just brought them back and had another run or two, the Coyotes would have at the very least had a cup run, whether they lose in the finals or not. And I felt so betrayed because of that, to where I would only go maybe one game a year and casually like glance at stats for the next few seasons until that, essentially going into the 2018-19 season. So I have such a weird relationship with this team, where some of my best moments and some of the biggest heartbreaks, being at that game, I think it was 5, they ended up losing to the Kings at home, being there, seeing this team get dismantled in front of you, I have so many different emotions when it comes to this team, and kind of the excitement and the heartbreak, and then seeing essentially everyone, because they're used to this team sucking, seeing this fan base praising mediocrity, and seeing this team, all the little problems that if they will be addressed, be it you want to bring in better power play coaches, or a different system, or bring in a little better players, or try to cycle players out that just aren't playing well, to the point where I get so frustrated and burnt out that part of this season I actually just kind of stopped watching for a good few weeks, because I just kind of couldn't get my heart into it anymore. So I actually don't know how I would react. I would probably, in all reality, it as a not a lifelong, because obviously the 10 years before, but for 14 years being a fan of this team, I would probably just have some sort of feeling of, we finally did it. I don't care if this team moves now. I don't care if we go to any other market, because forever the Arizona Coyotes have a cup in Arizona. It's proven hockey can work in the desert. I don't even care what happens at this point. We finally made it to the promised land, where I would probably just feel ecstatic, relieved, and maybe slightly exhausted by the journey.
That was terrific, man. I what you said at the end is very profound, in that you just want one. Even if they never win one again, that's like it's a life moment. Especially for sports fans, it's a life moment to see your team finally win a championship. And I do, even though my Sharks haven't won one, I did experience that in 2010 when my Giants won the World Series, because my dad was a lifelong Giants fan ever since he could talk, and to actually be able to watch them clinch that World Series, to drive home to my parents' house 90 minutes away on that day, just so I could be with my dad when they won the championship. That's one of the most special moments of my life.
That's really sweet. Like, no meme, man. That's actually just really sweet to hear.
Yeah. I hope the same for you, dude. Because I obviously I don't have a horse in this race. There are plenty of teams who I will, I'll be happy to see win a Stanley Cup. If a Canadian team wins, that's great. I myself, I'll be, if anybody that I'll be supporting, it will be a couple teams that aren't traditional hockey markets. I'll be supporting the Panthers and the Minnesota Wild, even though they're in a hockey market. They're not the biggest in terms of fan base or anything like that. I'll be pulling for them. And then probably after that, I'd probably pull for the Coyotes. So even though I've been to Nashville, I liked watching a Preds game in person. I will be rooting for you guys at least in the first round.
I'm going to be rooting for Arizona 1, Vegas 2, Carolina 3, because they stole my heart with that whole Jerks thing last year. But on top of that, and this is a thing that I've tried to allude to before, I actually have been a very, and I say this, very casual fan for many years, because when I was originally playing the video games, I actually liked their roster and their jerseys. So I kind of wanted them to succeed as well, even though I was never an outward yeah, this is my team, because of course I had the Coyotes.
Interesting. Well, I look back at that Canes Cup roster from 2006. It is insane. They had some amazing players, including Eric Stahl, who was, just a kid basically and just lit up the scoreboard. And they had Rod Brindamore, and they even had Matt Cullen, who won 2 cups with the Penguins, basically in his early 40s. So it was a very special team and a good team to pick. And speaking of jerseys, if you don't mind, I was wondering, could you possibly rank the Arizona Coyotes jerseys over the years from your least favorite to your favorite? I'm curious to know. Actually, that was a question from one of our subscribers here.
You want me to go least favorite to favorite?
Yeah, or if it's easier to do the reverse, that's fine. But the least favorite's kind of fun, because then it really kind of paves the way for why something is your favorite.
All right, I will go with my least favorite has to be the away jersey around the Decade in the Desert era, because it was just really bland. It was essentially just a white jersey, but that was it, with some minor striping at the bottom. I'm just not a fan of how boring it looked. My second least favorite, or next up on the list, is the away, or at that time it was the home Kachina, the white one. Mainly because I don't like white jerseys. They're really easy to stain. They don't look very good, and on top of that, the colored jerseys have a lot more expression to them. And then probably had to be the away jersey around that Peter Mueller era with the slight stripe on top. I like what they were going for there, but it still didn't end up looking all that good. And I'll just throw ahead the current away jersey right around there too, because again, I have a huge bias against those non-colored jerseys.
Well, even though look as good. I would say though, I would probably say that the away jersey for the Coyotes is the current one. I actually would say that that's kind of underrated. I think it looks pretty nice in terms of how the arms look. I like how they put black on the arms there, and I like the patch that they used for that as well, the Arizona State one. So I'd say that might be a top 10 favorite away jerseys for me right now in the NHL.
I do like that patch. I wish they would have kept that top striping, because I love that top shoulder stripe, because it again has a little bit more personality and color to the jersey, and it'll contrast better with the Arizona State logo. I just wish they would have added that as well, because as much as I'll admit I thought the new jerseys were dumb, because of course they were changed. I'm like, oh, why is there half black, half white sleeves? But it does look nice after enough time has passed.
Okay, so the away jerseys are on the bottom for you. So then which ones come after that for you?
All right, after that one, probably the Decade in the Desert home jersey. It's plain red, but of course has that weird mesh to the side of the arms, and I'm just not a fan of that. It's visible. Obviously, all of them have mesh around there, so it's a little bit more breathable, but it was just so apparent with those Coho jerseys. I think Coho was making them at the time. Was it CCM? It might have been CCM, but they just never ended up looking good. The next one, I guess I'm just trying to find the specific order. Gonna be a bit of a hot take. I'm gonna go with the Kachina. The original Kachina, because I like it. It's a good-looking jersey. I hate the hype for it, because people like to act like they've always loved this jersey. They thought it was ugly from the start. All right, my dad was here when this team first moved here. I was born a little bit after it was announced they were coming here. No one liked the jersey. They all thought it looked ugly. The only reason they like it now is because that whole 16-bit nostalgia. You saw it with the video game industry. Whenever things are old enough, people start to look back on it fondly, and I just don't think the design is that strong. I like the jersey itself. I like the mix of the black and the green, that little stripe of, I think it's maroon. Just the Kachina the Kachina logo itself, I never really liked. I think it looks particularly ugly.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and especially when you're comparing it to other professional sports logos. It was interesting because I remember actually liking this because when I was 10 years old, I went to a game at the first arena there. So this is 1997, and I don't think I do anymore, but I actually bought a flag there. They had like a little flag. I just thought that the colors and the interesting design were kind of neat.
You went to the America West Arena?
Yeah, long time ago.
Oh my god. But my favorite memory there, I was too young to remember most of this, so I can't tell you what year it was. I'm just going to say blanket 2001. This is a generic thing. My dad takes me to a preseason game. They're lighting off fireworks inside the building. I immediately start running away because I was afraid of the loud noises, and my dad wasted his time driving out there.
Yeah, that's the thing. When you bring young children to sporting events, you really it almost feels like you're not at a sporting event because you're basically in a babysitting funhouse.
Pretty much.
All right, so original Kachina, and I think that will leave us with about what three more? Okay.
Alright, so number 3, purely for nostalgia, was that 07-08, Peter Mueller era Coyotes full red jersey, the home jerseys. I absolutely love how simple it was, and of course it was kind of, that's my nostalgia talking, so that's just outside of the top 3 because I forgot there's one additional one that's going to be a huge hot take. Alright, number 3 has to be the current home jerseys. I thought they looked ugly and stupid because I'm like, well, why are you changing the jerseys? They've grown on me. I don't know why I thought it was as ugly, minus just, no one likes to see that change when that's, especially your first jersey change out of kind of middle to high school, because that's kind of what you grew up with. So when that first changes, you're like, why would you do that? That's dumb. But I actually like how they look. I like the little paws. I wish they would have had one side with the paw, one side with the Arizona State crest, kind of like how it had one side half moon, one side Phoenix crest, the Arizona State, which says Phoenix in the middle of it on the Peter Mueller era jerseys. But then moving on to number 2, it's the Flying Fox. It's the one, same around the Peter Mueller era, because that logo is not a coyote. It's not a coyote running. It's a fox. It has a bushy tail. Let's all just get that out of the way. It looks ugly. I hate the logo, but the jersey design itself. Same thing with the Kachina. It's just such a beautiful mix of different colors and designs, and the little paw, crest on the shoulders. I liked a lot what was going on with that design. I just wish they would have kept that and either had a cursive Phoenix Coyotes in the middle, kind of like how you have Bolts or Sens or whatever, or they would have just had the regular Coyotes logo. Or my favorite Coyotes logo on there, which wouldn't have clashed with the current design, that would have had to alter it, would be what we refer to as the Salamander jersey. So it's the old school Kachina Coyote head on a ridiculous green jersey that has like a desert landscape on the bottom. With, I know it's supposed to be, I think it's a gecko, but it looks like a salamander. So it's got a salamander on it and a cactus, a little cactus patch. And I've always loved this. Ever since I was a kid, huge bias. I wanted them to bring this back. I was a little, okay, why are you bringing back the Kachina when this jersey just looks better, at least in my opinion, because I like those kind of singular colored jerseys for the most part, instead of mixing too many colors when I'm talking about my favorites. And then you have the patch towards the bottom, so it's just kind of one of those ugly, I can't help but love this kind of designs. I want one. They're way too damn expensive. I'm not paying $300 for one of these things, but I will get one day.
Hey, I'm right there with you. That jersey. Now, see, here's the weird thing. You've got similar jerseys that were released around that time with the Burger King jersey, with the Wild Wing jersey, the Fisherman as well. It's interesting because most people actually like the Fisherman jersey now, not just for nostalgia purposes. It's really people who aren't Islanders fans think it's actually a pretty cool looking jersey. But when you look at the Burger King and the Wild Wing, and it's not just because I'm a Sharks fan, those jerseys to me are so hideous, but I don't want to collect them. Whereas the jersey you're referring to, which also goes by the name of the Peyote jersey, I like to call it the Vision Quest jersey, or you could even call it, as one viewer said, the Taco Time jersey. That is so, yeah. That, in other words, that's what you wear when you roll up to Taco Bell at 2:30 in the morning on a Saturday. That jersey is so insanely just trippy, and it's a kid's like a 5-year-old kid's school art project. It's so ridiculous. I effing love it. I love it. I want to get one too. And I know that they're expensive, like you mentioned. But if you find one for about 150, then you're in good company. But damn, I gotta get me one of those. They're just too much of a hot mess to pass up.
All right. Now, I guess I'll ask the questions, I'll go ahead and take over this amateur journalist crown, if you don't mind. What are your top 3 jerseys in your collection?
Oh, okay. Well, I got one recently that is just absolutely magnificent. I love it to death, and it is a Mighty Ducks Teemu Selanne jersey. The eggplant, and I got that from Hockey Authentic. It is just gorgeous. I knew that I liked the Mighty Ducks jersey. Some people, swear by that as their favorite. To me, it wasn't quite on that level. But damn, when I opened that thing up a few weeks ago, it's just gorgeous, man. I haven't taken the tags off yet. Hopefully one day when I actually get around to visiting every NHL arena, I'll go to Anaheim and I'll wear that jersey because damn, it's smoking, man. I love it. Another one that I absolutely adore is a recent one, or a recent design, sort of. It's my Heritage Classic from this past season when the Flames played the Winnipeg Jets. It's a Flames jersey that I have. So it's a white rendition of what they wore in the 1980s. And it has the Heritage Classic patch on it. And then on the back, I put Twisted Wrister. And I put my number on it, and I'll do that from time to time now. Like I'll get that on the back of some jerseys. Yeah, that one's great. And you know what? I'm actually, because I've got that one behind me, and I've got another one behind me that's pretty damn special too. It's not my favorite jersey in terms of the actual product, but this is how it came up. I don't know if you were watching my live stream when we did this, where people helped me pick out the next jersey for my collection.
I don't think I got to that part, mainly because my internet likes to just not work sometimes.
Fair enough, my friend. So I went through these elaborate questions. I had this kind of like to choose your own adventure in a sense, where I said, okay, guys, what division should I go for? Should I go for the Pacific, Atlantic, Metro, Central? And so we went through this exercise, and that was usually 5 or 6 questions. We went through those exercises about 3 or 4 times. And we came away with a few different finalists, essentially. Well, anyway, one of those finalists was the overwhelming choice by the community, and that was to get a Edmonton Oilers jersey that has been customized for the late Colby Cave, excuse me. So I have that jersey hanging in my studio here, and I'm hoping to keep that prominently displayed, through the rest of this season and off season and whatnot, because it's really special when the community wants to honor somebody. Even though Colby Cave didn't play very much in the NHL, nonetheless, it's just heartbreaking when you lose someone just at 25 years old like that. So I've got that hanging up here, and I think about the subscribers and the viewers every time I look at it.
That's really nice. All right, and I guess now I'm obligated to give you my 3 favorite in my collection.
Oh, by all means.
All right, so my 3 favorite jerseys. It's hard to kind of number them or list them specifically, so I'll just kind of go in order of how I got them. The first one is my first ever jersey that my dad bought for me on my birthday in 2007, that when I got to meet Shane Doan after the game, he actually got down on his knee like he was proposing to the AZ Sports guy, signed the jersey while I was wearing it, and I remember how special I felt because my favorite player is giving me the time of day, and even though I spilt Kool-Aid on it, and I can't wash it because it's got an autograph on it, I still keep it hanging up just for the sentimental value.
That is really a life-defining moment. Then I can see why this is all really special for you.
The second one, when I started getting back into hockey, I actually got a video I'm going to be working on about telling what got me back into hockey. Spoilers, it was the Golden Knights. But I ended up getting a Shane Doan jersey because I had so many jerseys back My dad used to work at the arena. I got to meet a lot of the players. I had so many different jerseys, Red Wings. I think I had a Ducks, but don't quote me on that. I had a bunch of different little stuff. And I had 4 Doan jerseys. I had the Flying Fox Doan jersey, I had a regular Doan jersey, I had a away Doan jersey, and of course my special Doan jersey. And for whatever reason, I was angsty out of high school. I started selling off all my video games, my sports stuff, just to kind of move on past that stuff. Part of that was probably because I felt hurt by the team blowing themselves up. But I ended up getting another Doan jersey, but all the Doan jerseys were too expensive. But on eBay, a woman's jersey, and back then I was still skinny, so I could still fit into it, was like $60. So I bought that, and I started wearing it around until I got too fat for it, and I hang it up now because Donor is retired. They retired his jersey. So now in the back of my room right now, and then when I get to move back into the office, finally, after I get it recarpeted, it's going to be hanging up in the background of every video, so you guys can see forever Shane Doan will be memorialized in my room.
Oh, that sounds fantastic, man. We'll have to make a wacky bet with you. So if you lose, you have to put the jersey on in one of your videos, and we'll call you Maddie Jacobson, or Madeline Jacobson.
First off, it's Martha, but I'm not gonna lie. I would even wear that jersey I got for my 11th birthday, that first Stone jersey. It looks terrible on me now, but I would even wear that if I lost a bet. I'll do it. I don't even care. All right, and my most special. This one is a clear number 1 for this. Do you know who the Arizona Sting are?
I don't think I do. I know of some Roadrunners, and I don't know. I could just probably name different snake species and expect that to be an actual sports team. But no, what is this Sting that you're speaking of?
So, when I first started watching hockey again, they were a national lacrosse team that played in Jobbing.com Arena with the Arizona Coyotes. And I'd watch them on TV. I always wanted to go to a game. My dad said he would take me. Never did. Then when they folded, I think it was after the 07 year, it was after their second trip to the National Lacrosse League Championship, they were selling off all their jerseys at the Coyotes store at heavy discounts. I begged my dad to buy me one. He never did. And at that point, for the last, I think that is 11 or 12 years, I just never thought I was going to get a Sting jersey. So when I got back into hockey and jersey collecting around late 2018 and pretty much all of 2019 for the first half, I found one for about $50 on eBay. I bought it, and when I finally got it, I'm like, this was like a 10-year dream in the making, even though nobody here cares about the Sting. Out of 4 seasons, they made the playoffs 3 times and went to the championship twice. They are one of the more successful teams that never won a championship in this state. No one cared about them, but this stupid little kid right here that liked their weird scorpion logo that was holding a lacrosse stick. And the fact that I got that jersey, it is the most special thing. I spammed it all over Instagram. I've spammed it over on any social media I could. I was bugging all my friends about it. My brother-in-law literally told me to shut the hell up about it. I refused because I had finally got my Sting jersey.
That's awesome, man. Hey, one of these days I should try to see if I can find one for the lacrosse team that was here for a while, the San Jose Stealth. I want to say that they're now the Vancouver Warriors. I don't know if you ever heard of the Stealth.
I think I vaguely have, but have you heard of the San Diego Seals?
Yes, I have. Yeah, they have a pretty sick logo, right?
The sick logo, a beautiful jersey. I love their use of purple. Oh, I've wanted to go to a game since they brought back up. Me and my brother-in-law were going to go out there. We just never ended up doing it. But, like, I want to go to a Seals game. I want to buy a Seals jersey. And I want to pretend I've been a lifelong fan the entire time because I love that logo on that jersey.
Yeah, you'll have to get a San Diego Gulls jersey as well while you're down there. Those are pretty fun. And I always do appreciate teams that are alpha enough to wear purple. Even though I'm not a Lakers fan, purple and gold looks beautiful. I'm a Minnesota Vikings fan. You know a thing or two about purple with the early days of the AZ Diamondbacks. So kudos to all those who sport the purps.
All right, one jersey you've always wanted but just never got.
Oh, well, there are plenty of those out there. In terms of one that it was the one that got away, I have the Reebok replica version of that. I want to get an authentic version, and those are very rare among Reeboks. And I remember that one time, this is when I had probably bought a couple of jerseys, so I wasn't really looking to spend at the time. And there was one offered up on eBay for $200, and not only was it an authentic, but it actually was customized, or it had Joe Thornton on it. And I was like, oh my God, should I go out and get it? So I thought about it for about 20 minutes. But the thing is that when I clicked into eBay, it was already purchased. So I missed out on it. Yeah. So,
Oh no.
yeah. Yeah, there are definitely a few out there that I know if I want to collect them, I'll be spending, $250, $300. And that would include, like the Taco Time jersey or the Peyote jersey, the Fisherman jersey. I want to get an original one of those. I can't think of anything else that would be more expensive than that necessarily. Or if it is more expensive, I'm not going to collect it. Those Wild Wing Ducks ones, sometimes those go for like 400 plus, but I'm not looking for that one. So yeah, I'd say that Sharks one is probably right up there for me.
Mine, other than I actually want it more than that Salamander jersey I was talking about. So, have you ever heard of the Phoenix Roadrunners from the East Coast Hockey League?
Yes, I have. I think from your channel.
I never got to go to a game. I wanted to. The tickets were cheap. My dad once again said he was going to take me. Never did, but I got into them a little bit. Very, very limited coverage. If no one cares about the Coyotes, who's going to talk about the East Coast Hockey League team? But I always wanted to go, and I hate powder blue as a color. I think it's disgusting looking. But their home powder blue jerseys, whether it's because of the nostalgia, because of the kind of thing with the Arizona State, the one that got away, but I desperately want one, and I'm not paying the price. I see it when I very rarely see it on eBay.
Oh, really? Like, what have you seen it listed for?
Last I remember was either 150 or 200, and I'm like, am I really gonna wear this? Like, if I had a lot of money in the bank and I was just looking to waste money, and I already had like a PS5 and Xbox Series X or whatever, I'm like, yeah, I would do it. But when money's a little tighter and I'm saving up for things, I'm like, am I really gonna wear this?
That's a good point, man. I mean, these jerseys I've bought, so many of them I've not even worn, or I've only worn them inside, not like outside or anything like that. So at some point I'll probably just be like, why am I even doing this if there's ever a time when I'm not actually running a channel. Now that you mentioned that jersey though, there are probably two other like non-NHL ones from defunct teams. One of them is the Cleveland Barons of what was the AHL. Actually, yeah, so I would love if, I don't know if this will ever be possible, but the Sharks have had a couple of very interesting affiliates. They had the Cleveland Barons, which was their logo. Their logo, I believe, was originally a prototype for the original San Jose Sharks. And so they modified this one, and it's an actual shark, but it's a Baron shark. So he's got like a top hat and a monocle. How amazing is that? And then
that sounds great.
Totally. And they also had a team called the Kentucky Thoroughblades, and their color scheme was kind of like purple and teal, kind of like the Diamondbacks. So if I could find one of those, that'd be amazing. And then there was a professional roller hockey league that even got some coverage from ESPN back in the 90s when ESPN gave a shit about hockey. And yeah, right. Now ESPN doesn't even give a shit about sports. And so
it's all just talking heads. Nothing's happened for 4 months. At this point, it's just turning into Fox News or CNN, to be honest.
For sure. But yeah, there was a professional roller team in San Jose. I didn't even know about this. They were called the San Jose Rhinos, and their primary color was purple. I saw a jersey that was listed, but it was pretty banged up. But if I could find something like that again, I would consider it. So yeah, man, jerseys, I could just do a separate podcast, like a whole series, podcast series on jerseys.
You should, because my list kind of runs out with original Hartford Whalers and the powder blue Atlanta Thrashers because they're ugly, and I kind of like it.
Ooh, I want to get me one of those too, for sure. Well, anyway, what can you share about sort of your plans for the channel going forward, and obviously use it as an opportunity to let people know what makes your channel interesting? I know that you're covering more than just the Coyotes.
I was unemployed. I was sleeping in an air mattress on the floor of my dad's loft, so on the lower floor. So I only just had a small TV and my Xbox One because I didn't have a wireless controller, so I couldn't sell it. So it was essentially useless. So I just sat around a lot all day and kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. But then after that Vegas trip, when I got back into hockey, I started because I love Arizona sports. I wanted to talk about the history. I wanted to bring the story of the Sting or the Phoenix Roadrunners to life, and I actually made, I think, pretty decent videos that for some reason I didn't back up. So I'm actually in the process of remaking those, talking about the history of the Phoenix Roadrunners and the different iterations, talking about the Arizona Sting. I really want to remake that Madhouse on McDowell video. I want to talk about the different champions of Arizona, because would you believe me if I said there are two hockey teams that are at the very least semi-pro level, but they're technically professional teams that have won championships in Arizona?
See, I didn't even know that.
So I want to talk about those, and there's so many little things with history. I want to do more spotlights on certain players. I want to give as much coverage as I can towards my beloved Arizona Rattlers. That was my original vision. Was I started just wanting to talk about Arizona sports and bring this history to life, and then I ended up finding this community of mostly hockey fans, and of course getting back into hockey kind of reignited that love of sports. And then that year when I started watching the Diamondbacks again, that sparked a love of baseball that I never knew I had. I always was interested, like, when I was a kid, but I never fell in love with the sport. And now I don't find anything more relaxing than having a cold beverage and a notepad in my hand while I'm watching a baseball game.
Damn straight, especially if Madison Bumgarner's pitching for you.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like in the Bay Area, but it's so frustrating as a Arizona sports fan. So I'm not a hardcore basketball fan, but I do like going to like the Suns games here and there, and then the Phoenix Mercury games, because I always end up getting free tickets. I have friends that work there, and no one ever wants to go to those games. So I'm like, it's a good night out. Let's go watch some basketball. And the fact that the Mercury have won, I think, 2 championships. The Rattlers, I think, have won 4 in just this side of the decade, like, the 2010s. And we have all these championships, these teams. I think even that one of those hockey teams, I'm just going to leave a little secret right now, that was playing up in northern Arizona, even won a championship in this 2010s era. And all we ever get on the radio is Cardinals and occasionally Suns, with very minor nods to the Diamondbacks and to the Coyotes, like David Peralta having a fantastic season. Let's talk about who the third line linebacker is going to be on the Cardinals, because they're getting ready to go into training camp. Like, I don't know what it's like for you out there, but that's what it's like with my favorite teams, and it makes me hate the Cardinals even though I'm a fan, because you just hear about them too much, and they and the Suns have sucked for so long.
That sort of thing had turned me off from following a couple other teams as well, because radio is the worst. When it comes to TV, our sports network, we have 2 sports networks. One that's more covering a couple of teams. The other one covers, like the Oakland A's. So, obviously something that's not as, widely watched, right? They also cover the Sharks on that network, but they provide a lot of Sharks coverage there. That's nice, but the radio is fucking terrible, man. Yeah. So that's why we've got YouTubers. I'm small compared to a couple other channels out here that cover specifically the Sharks. So there are a handful of content creators who are big Sharks fans and just want the team to get a little bit more cred around this area.
Another reason why I started, primarily to talk about the history and whatnot, but also just to give attention, like the Diamondbacks, the Coyotes, the Rattlers, these teams that no one cares about. You listen to the radio. I don't know if you have a personality similar to out here. We have John Gambadoro, who acts like he knows everything. He quote unquote broke a scoop about what trade was it last year? A Suns player got traded away at the deadline. He's like, oh, breaking, but yet 8 hours or 12 hours prior, Adrian Wojnarowski already announced on Twitter that trade was happening. And we have these pretentious, don't really know a whole lot about sports or barely know about Arizona sports kind of guys that are on the radio. The closest we have is Ron Wolfley, who's just a blanket optimist. And then we have like Bigley and Murata, who have both been covering Arizona sports for a long time. But even then, they're still not that knowledgeable in the Coyotes. They never talk about the Rattlers. They talked about them once in the last few years, and that was because later on that day was the Arena Bowl, or the United Bowl, because now they're in the IFL. They don't talk about the Mercury. They barely talk about the Diamondbacks. Bickley and Murata give the best coverage for the Diamondbacks on the radio, but we have these personalities that just don't acknowledge anything that's not popular.
Do you think that has something to do with just the sports culture in Phoenix? For example, when you hear about what a good sports town Boston is, or Pittsburgh, or let's see, what's another really good example? Where the diehard fans are, right? So, you hear about that more so, I think, kind of like in the Midwest and on the East Coast. You don't hear about that so much on the West Coast. Nobody says the Bay Area is a great sports area. Sometimes people say maybe Seattle is, but yeah, the culture out here, we've got our share of diehards, absolutely, but it's not something that permeates into the workplace. It's not something that permeates into regular conversations with people. You have to be wearing the gear in order to really find somebody who actually does give a crap about that sort of thing, outside the playoffs. How accurate would a take like that actually reflect where you're living?
Slightly accurately, but I'm gonna go ahead and let my near and dear pessimist come out, because I've been a little more optimistic lately. And I don't really care to sugarcoat it. Arizona fans fucking suck. We have our diehards, just like you mentioned with your like the Rattlers was one of the best diehard fan bases I've ever been a part of, and I absolutely love them. The Diamondbacks have some, not as many as I would like. The Coyotes have a few, and most of them don't know anything about hockey. But I'll go ahead and just leave that where that is. But it's just we're a state of transplants. We are essentially, the greater Phoenix area. We are Eastern Los Angeles, because people can't afford to live in Los Angeles anymore. So they come here, and they're only fans of their LA teams. So they still trash talk the Arizona teams. No one really shows up for the most part unless they're winning. Unless an LA team or another successful team is coming in. Like, our fans are just terrible. I try to have conversations with them, and I am very educated on the Coyotes. I'm mildly educated on the Roadrunners, on the Rattlers, and on the Diamondbacks. And if I have a conversation with anybody about any of these teams, even the Cardinals, which I'm more educated now than I've ever been, because me and my dad have kind of bonded over watching football for the last couple of years and playing fantasy football. But over that, and talking to my brother-in-law about the basketball, like, actually got me a little bit more into basketball slightly. I still know enough to know that people around here don't know sports. They don't understand it. They are like, oh, yeah, that team, the Coyotes, the team that sucks. I'm like, what do you mean? They're first place in the Pacific, and they've been for the last month. Like, they're so behind the times. They don't pay attention to anything. They very much are sheeple, quote unquote, because if it's not in the newspaper, on the radio, or on TV, they don't know about it. As a collective, there are, again, those diehard fans, and especially, the Rattlers fans and a little bit of Diamondbacks fans I got to interact with. I love them, just bleeding heart. Coyotes fans, not so much. I actually actively despise this fan base, but you never see knowledgeable fans out here because no one cares.
Interesting. That's unfortunate to hear, and I do somewhat understand that the sports culture can kind of be diluted when you are somewhere that has a lot of transplants as well. Certainly, and Arizona's sports market, for the most part, and a lot of, and in a sense, other places in the West, is kind of younger anyway. It's not like a place like Chicago where the Cubs have been around for over a century. The Bears have been around for a century. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. The oldest team we have is the Phoenix Suns, and I think they expanded in 65, or was it? I think it was 65 or 68. So, we don't really have that huge, deep history. We surprisingly have a pretty deep history with hockey here, but we have this deep histories with, small niches. And we have those small, very tiny, quote-unquote, passionate fans. But everyone as a whole, as a collective, terrible fans.
Okay, I've got, I guess, two? I think I got two more questions. So, speaking of hockey in Arizona, any upcoming plans to talk about the history of Arizona State's hockey program that is an NCAA Division I program?
I've actually had some very small bits of coverage on ASU. I don't get the chance to actually watch them except for when I was working at Gila River Arena last year, and I was working their little tournament. So I've tried to dabble with covering them. It's a little hard to find accurate information and also footage to back up, so if I really want to watch it for myself. So it's one of those things where not only did it not do very well, but I was never the most knowledgeable. That the most I can probably do is a very brief kind of look at, and I really don't think that would kind of be worth my time. Not. It's funny because I actually love ASU. I wanted to go there back when I still thought I was smart enough for college, and I just can't get enough information to be knowledgeable enough.
Okay, so if you were to say which Arizona team is the most likely, let's say the Big Four, right? So which of the Big Four is most likely to win Arizona's next championship?
You know what? Arizona Diamondbacks. The freaky Mike Hazen, just the moves he's made, the fact that this team, and they've fallen under the radar a lot because they've been as competitive as they've been. Last year, they were quoted like literally one of the most mediocre baseball teams of all time, and they were still, I think, 84. Was it 84 and 70? Would it be 78 with the amount of games they play? But they were a better record than they were 2 years ago when they had the NL West locked up for about a month before they started kind of floundering, and they finished 82 and 80. And then the previous season when they actually made it into the playoffs in that wild card spot. So this team has been ridiculously consistently competitive. Mike Hazen, I love this about him. He has no problem dealing prospects to get players that we can use because he's not interested in having the best farm system. He wants a competitive team, and then we ended up moving around pieces and adding depth that we can probably bring up into the roster in the next year or two. If there's going to be a champion in Arizona, by the end of this upcoming decade, it's going to be the Diamondbacks first and foremost.
Okay, well, I think that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the Twistcast. Matt, thank you so much for coming on the show here. Some great little tidbits about the Coyotes and Phoenix sports. And please, everybody, go over to Matt's channel. Make sure to subscribe, hit that notifications bell, and let's build him back up because AZ Sports, you got to make sure that you're covering all your bases when it comes to sports in North America. So, Matt, thanks so much for joining the show. Anything you want to add before we sign off here?
Anything I want to add? I would like to make it known that the AZ Sports guy is still the only knowledgeable source for Arizona sports coverage on the entirety of our little media circuit, and I am by far the smallest and least important.
And that's why you're here, because this is where the least important people gather to shit talk. Anyway, I think we're gonna
for that any day, my friend.
Down like a clown, Charlie Brown. Let's go ahead and sign off here, and we'll kick it back over to the main segment. So, a few topics as posed to me by our community out here, and of course, join us on our Wednesday live streams if you haven't already. First of all, which 3 teams would I want to design jerseys for? That's a fun one. All right, we're going to confine this to the NHL here. And I'll go ahead and leave my Sharks out of it because, that's just kind of the bias there. So, 3 teams. Let's think about this for a moment. Well, you might want to try a team that hasn't really done much in the way of jersey designs in the first place. So, maybe a younger franchise, right? For example, what about the Minnesota Wild? They haven't had too many different styles. They have a lovely logo. They're in Minnesota, the state of hockey. I think that there is, some untapped potential there about how you decide to express that brand. Whether you use the logo, whether you use something like that state of hockey patch they had in the Stadium Series. Yeah, I am certainly a fan of that brand, and I think that there's more that you can do to expand that. So I would consider Minnesota. I love the jerseys they have now. I mean, just to be able to design a cream-colored version for away games would be terrific. So I'm going to put them up there for sure. Another team, obviously, that came into the league at the same time. You could say the Columbus Blue Jackets, but I've seen so many great jersey concepts out there already that I'm not really, married to the idea that that's one of the 3 teams I would pick. Vegas, of course, would be an interesting team as well. Because, yeah, they do have a design in the works for their alternate jersey, but at this point, we don't know what that's going to look like. We just know it's going to be gold. And, I mean, you could have interesting designs out there, using their charcoal gray, using gold, using black. You could do another black jersey there. You can even introduce red more. I've seen some fantastic concepts out there already, but I think that that logo itself looks really good in small formats. and you can put it on a jersey and it still looks great. And then you have a great secondary logo as well. So you have some good elements to work with. You have that gold foil on the sleeves there. You have the detailing in the logo. And so it would be tempting. It would be tempting for sure. So I would consider that as well. Another team that I really would like to see rebrand is the New Jersey Devils. I know that people really like their look, but I think that logo needs to be somewhat updated. I mean, conceptually it's great, but it's a little plain. And I think that even if you kept that as the primary logo, they could, create some additional logos or some form of imagery that kind of expands that, right? If you did something with just a pitchfork, or if you did something more elaborate with an outline of the state of New Jersey, or something to that degree. I think that there's much more opportunity there when you're looking at the theme of Devils. There have been so many different interesting mascots in sports with Devils, like the Duke Blue Devils, the Arizona State Sun Devils, the Cardiff Devils, Manchester United even. So really, there has to be more that the New Jersey Devils can do. And think of it this way, they're in a market with the Rangers and the Islanders, teams that have been around for quite some time as well, who've won Stanley Cups and whatnot. New Jersey has too. But I think that there's more opportunity for some swagger out of New Jersey. I for one, don't like their Adidas jerseys. I know that some people do. I liked what they did with Reebok. I thought their jerseys looked good there. But yeah, I think that there's opportunity to, have a black jersey, or to have a green jersey or something. Shake things up a little bit. Introduce some gray. That seems to work pretty well for some teams out there as well. So I think the Devils would be up there for me too. Of course, I could make a case for just about any team, but there are some brands like the Red Wings or even the Maple Leafs or the Canadiens where you can't really get away with too much without at least raising some eyebrows, and not necessarily in a good way. So those are kind of three teams that come to mind there: Minnesota, Vegas, New Jersey. And yeah, of course, I could talk about, who wouldn't want to be a concept or a designer for the Buffalo Sabres and finding ways to reintroduce the goat head, or, the red and black color scheme with the classic logo or something like that. So you can make the case for a lot of other teams out there, and I hope that I have a chance to design more of those jersey concepts. Now, speaking of those, a lot of you out there have seen some of my ECHL concepts as I've been posting them to Twitter and to Instagram, as well as the Amino app that I was talking about earlier. So I am in the process of getting featured on a channel or two. And once that is released, I will also release a companion video on my channel in which I show off each of the 26 concepts and I talk about my creative process behind them, because it's kind of like that secret sauce, how it's made. I had a blast creating these. I did this inside Sports Templates. Head over to sportstemplates.net if you're interested. And that will be kind of a neat new type of video for this channel. And hopefully going forward, I can produce more concepts. I probably would start with the AHL and spend, about a month working on those, because these concepts, they take up a ton of time. Nonetheless, it's some of the most fun I've had in creating content for this channel. Thoughts on a fourth or retro jersey program? Well, yes. I mean, I love the idea of having more throwbacks in the NHL and on a fairly consistent or on a semi-consistent basis, right? So, for example, if the Colorado Avalanche wore Nordiques jerseys every other Thursday home game or something like that, bring them out for 5 or 6 times. And I think that something like that is just enough, right? Or in the Swedish culture, that's referred to as, I think, lagom, which means just enough, right? So that where you can feel satisfied, but not like bombarded or overwhelmed by it. I'm sure that there are some fans out there who don't want to see the Nordiques jerseys associated with the Avalanche. But if you do it just a few times, that there can lead to a ton of sales. That right there can, I guess, drum up even more interest. You can run other interesting promotions around that. Of course, I myself would love to see a concept that is a hybrid of sort of the Nordiques and the Avalanche and sort of the Colorado Rockies. So basically replacing the fleur-de-lis with something that is like the Colorado Rockies logo, something that's mountainous in that sense. That's kind of a separate discussion. Think of either the Stars or the Wild wearing Minnesota North Stars jerseys. How sick would that be, right? Think of the Sharks wearing maybe the Seals, even though the Seals are kind of more tied to the Stars franchise, but you could do something like that. Philadelphia Flyers, they could wear the Quakers. Montreal could wear the Maroons or the Wanderers, So a lot of teams have, NHL history in their city itself. However, a decent amount of teams don't. So what do you do then? What do you do if you're the Nashville Predators, for example, right? I know that in the Winter Classic, they wore the Dixie Flyers inspired jerseys. But the thing is that doesn't necessarily, it's not as well known in the greater hockey community. We don't all know about the Dixie Flyers. We might not know about a team that had been playing in Tampa before the Lightning came in there. I can't even name any teams that did. So what do those teams do, right? Do they just make their own retro-looking jersey? I don't know if that's exactly the way to do it. But maybe create a repository of teams that are somewhat tied to that particular NHL franchise and give teams the option to design jerseys based on that. At the very least, you make warm-up jerseys for something like that, and I know other teams have done that. The Kings, for example, made a warm-up of the Burger King, and that sort of thing I imagine would sell, right? The Ducks and the Wild Wing. And there are some teams that actually have so many different good jerseys from the past that you could even, resurrect those over the course of several seasons. So, for example, if you're the, let's say, the Washington Capitals, for example, they have that retro alternate right now. Maybe the next year they come out with that white version that they used in the 2011 Winter Classic. Then the next year, or maybe 2 years down the road, they produce an Adidas version of their 2015 Winter Classic. These, I think, are easy money for revenue opportunities. I certainly think so. I don't know if that would interfere with Adidas's production capacity, but nonetheless, as long as you have Shannon the hockey guy, Kale Vesper Hockey, post to post, as long as you have people out there as ambassadors to jersey collection, then that right there is just going to amplify sales and interest in jerseys and apparel overall. You look at bench clearers, you look at old time hockey, or brands that are creating sort of vintage looking apparel out there. I think that the market for that, while it might not be overwhelmingly large, it's people who are very committed to having good quality products out there. So I hope that we see more interesting homages to other teams out there in the form of jerseys, even if, we're talking about something like, a Dixie Flyers or like a defunct league out there. Here was an interesting one for the Sharks fans out there. So somebody had asked me, all right, well, if the Sharks were to move, where would they go in order for me to stay a fan? To me, if the Sharks were to relocate, I think what's crucial, first of all, is that they would have to stay as the Sharks. They couldn't change their name to something else. In basketball, I grew up as a Seattle Sonics fan. And when I was, I think, roughly in college, that's when they moved to Oklahoma City. And they rebranded as the Thunder. And that right there was just an immediate turnoff. I had kind of distanced myself from the NBA a little bit at that point. But nonetheless, if they were the Oklahoma City Sonics, maybe. If they would have kept that brand, maybe. They had Kevin Durant, so I was like, all right, I like me some Durant. But they totally changed things up. And Oklahoma City, I don't have any ties to that. So the Sharks would have to stay as the Sharks. That's the reason why I fell in love with them. Not just because they were the closest team. My favorite animal has always been sharks. So that is definitely a critical factor there. Now, where could they go? Well, somebody posed the idea of them going to Sacramento or somewhere, they could go to San Francisco, Oakland, Sacramento, 2 hours away from me right there. And I said, okay, well, that's perfect. They could go to Reno, which is close to Sacramento, and that would be perfect as well. Though keep in mind, if they were to go somewhere else, you wouldn't want them to be sharing a market with another team. So that's important as well. Not to mention a place like Reno or Sacramento. If I had to relocate myself, I would, go to Lake Tahoe essentially, which is pretty close by. If the Sharks were to move elsewhere, though, like we're talking kind of out of state, Portland's a possibility. I know that obviously Seattle's going to have their NHL team, but Portland is very successful with the Blazers and with the Timbers of Major League Soccer. I like the city a lot. I mean, the natural beauty of it, the breweries, that's kind of the stuff that makes Portland a cool place. But of course, times are a little different now. I won't get into that. But, ideally, in ideal circumstances, could I root for a team, from here that moves to Portland but stays as the Sharks? Yeah, I could. I'm trying to think of where else they could go where I would possibly cheer for them. It's not like they could go to Minnesota, because even though I'm a Vikings fan, I don't think that the idea of having two teams in Minnesota is all that possible. I'm trying to think of what else would be viable, really. I myself, I've always lived pretty much on the West Coast, so I think of myself as sort of a Western United States fella. If they move to Salt Lake City, that would be possible. I could see myself being a fan, and Salt Lake is definitely a growing metro area, so yeah, I think that's certainly a possibility. A lot of people from California have moved out there, so that's probably another area that I think that you're not infringing upon other markets so much. I know that Colorado is probably the main team that people root for out there, but even so, you already have a team in the NBA, the Denver Nuggets, and you have the Utah Jazz. You have Real Salt Lake of MLS. You have the Colorado Rapids. So it's certainly possible. Other places where you could possibly have another NHL team, you could have one. You could in a place like Milwaukee, perhaps. You could have a team in Indianapolis. You could have a team in Kansas City. Actually, you know what? If the Sharks move to Kansas City, I might actually have a soft spot and cheer for them, because Kansas City was the home of the Sharks' first IHL affiliate, which was the Kansas City Blades. So that's a stretch, but damn it, if I could fly out there a couple times a year for games and Kansas City barbecue, I'm not going to oppose that whatsoever. So, great question out there. Which 3 arenas would I like to visit most? And which 3 former arenas would I like to visit most? Well, as somebody who's never seen an NHL game in Canada, you have to at least put 1 or 2 Canadian venues there. When I think of former arenas, I think of the Montreal Forum. That's a cathedral right there. There's so much history there too. So for former arenas, that would definitely be up there. Another former arena that I would like to go to, that I didn't actually as a kid, is the Cow Palace, where the Sharks played their first 2 seasons. So the Cow Palace, it's definitely old. It's from, I think, like the 1910s or the 1920s. It was a livestock sort of exhibition hall. But I think what would be cool about that, not just the idea of seeing the Sharks in there or time traveling back to the early 1990s while, the Shark Tank in San Jose was being built. This was an intimate atmosphere. We're talking about, I think, 10,500 people, more or less, 10,500 or 11,000. So seeing an NHL game downsized like that, I think would be really interesting. Seeing the original Shark sweaters out there and just getting to see who the original real diehards were in San Jose Sharks lore, if you will. Another former arena. Now, somebody said, what about Joe Louis? And I said, that's a good one. I'm not entirely sure. I almost want to think of Pittsburgh with the Igloo, the first retractable roof for a hockey game. That'd be kind of cool if the roof was open and you were watching a Penguins game, and time traveled and saw Lemieux and Yager. So that's kind of up there for me. Northlands Coliseum. I don't know. I don't hear too many people talk about that from kind of a venue standpoint. Obviously, if you time traveled, then you could see Gretzky and Messier and whatnot. Maybe time travel and see the Minnesota North Stars or the Pepsi Coliseum where the Nordiques played. Something like that I think would probably pique my interest. But let's go ahead and move on to current. I hear great things about PPG Paints Arena, so I would almost consider that. Not to mention, Pittsburgh's a great sports town. I've never been. I would really like to go, though. And, hopefully double dip. You see the Penguins and you see either the Pirates or the Steelers. I hear that those venues, particularly PNC Park where the Pirates play, is supposed to be fantastic. So I can't imagine not going to Pittsburgh to, actually see some NHL action. And this is coming from a Sharks fan. Another place I would really like to go to today is probably Bell MTS Place in Winnipeg, because again, it's the atmosphere that is, in some way, shape, or form, it's kind of second to none. You think of the intensity of that environment. I went to Nashville recently, if you want to talk about, good fan atmospheres, and I can definitely attest to that too. The idea here is that Winnipeg, it kind of lives and dies by hockey, because it's not the most lively of places to visit necessarily, especially in winter. So I'm somebody who likes that idea of going to a game at that time of year, freezing my butt off as soon as I, walk into the negative 25-degree blizzard and stuff like that. I like that. That's kind of how it was when I went to Minneapolis for the Minneapolis Miracle. I got off the plane, and, a cold winter day where I live is, the high will be like 52 degrees. So getting out of the airport and it's minus 10, I'm like, oh man, I know that I'm, actually one with the elements here for postseason football. It's awesome. So to experience that with hockey would be great as well. I hear that Little Caesars Arena is supposed to be fantastic too. So that would certainly be in the conversation. I would like to go to a Capitals game, because I have one of my good friends lives out there, and the opportunity to go see Ovechkin while he's still playing in his barn. And I am a fan of other players on Washington, especially if they kept Brendan Dillon. I would be really happy going to a game like right now. Or you could even make that argument for Carolina, just because of, the resurrection of that fan base there. So I know it's interesting. I'm choosing teams in the Metro Division. I don't really talk about the Metro Division that much. Let's see. Anybody else that I can particularly think of? Well, for those of you who don't know, I've been to games in Boston. I went about 5 years ago there. I've also been to Nashville, as I mentioned, and Tampa. And when I was much younger, I went to a game in Arizona before the Coyotes moved into Gila River Arena. Of course, some of you out there would say, what about Vegas? Talk about fan atmosphere, talk about, just a lot of buzz around that part of the city. Well, you're kind of talking to the wrong guy. I would like to go at some point, but just in terms of entertainment and that sort of thing, I'm not the biggest, sort of Vegas person necessarily. Now, granted, there are probably some of you out there who talk to me on a regular basis on this channel who are saying, well, why wouldn't you come out? You can come meet us. You don't have to see the Sharks. You can see us play some other team. Hey, I wouldn't be opposed to that, guys. I'm not opposed to it. Just, it's not first on my list. The United Center, though, I would have to say would be one of those teams as well, or one of those venues too. So I've lived in Chicago, but I never went to a game there. So let's say United Center, let's say PNC or PPG Paints, and let's say Bell MTS Place. Honorable mention is Verizon Center, or whatever they call it now. Capital One? I don't know. Capital One. I'm not entirely sure. All right, well, to wrap things up, I'll just give you a sense of kind of what's coming down the pipeline here on Twisted Wrister Hockey. Of course, I'm going to be trying to build out my platform here for podcasts, and I'm going to be looking into getting these onto Spotify. You can also find me on SoundCloud. I'm starting to upload podcasts there as well. So look for that. And of course, if you have any feedback about these podcasts, let me know down in the comments below. If you have any questions that I could possibly or topics I could discuss next time around, let me know. I would be happy to at least entertain the idea. As I mentioned earlier, we'll have an ECHL jersey concept video, and I'll be featured on a channel or two in the near future. So looking forward to that. I'll be producing a video at some point in the next probably month and a half on the San Francisco Bulls, formerly of the ECHL. And I'll also be producing more videos on the San Jose Sharks offseason. So talking about free agents, talking about players that the Sharks need to retain, or the types of players that they should be going after in free agency. Talking about how the team can maybe turn it around for next year in terms of players who had a down year. There are a lot of them who are going to look to bounce back there. And of course, now that we're getting closer to playoffs, I'll have some content to produce for that as well. So anyway, my friends, that's going to do it for this podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the big thumbs up there. Subscribe if you haven't already. And of course, thank you so much, Matthew Jacobson. It's been a pleasure having you on the channel. Hopefully we have another opportunity for something like that as well. Anyway, guys, this has been Nick with Twisted Wrister Hockey. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll catch you later. Ciao.